Hello everyone, welcome to today's lecture on social reproduction of inequality. This is part of the ongoing series on inequality and difference. The key points that would be raised in this lecture would be a discussion around education as a promoter of equality or inequality. Then several issues that are related to restricted opportunity, which in turn lead to inequality and promote differences in society. Then several invisible barriers that exist in today's world, as well as limitations of formal education. Education and social reproduction of inequality. This is a reality that has existed, and I am going to share some thoughts related to this. Schools are rampant with inefficiencies, inadequacies and inequalities. And when I say schools, it basically means our education system. So being poor is a universal marker for restricted opportunity in education, and being rural and poor is a double disadvantage. And being poor, rural and female is a triple barrier to equal opportunity. And these are the realities of today's world also. If we talk about formal education, then it appears as a two-edged sword. It connects with the broader world, but also with its mainstream curricula and teaching methods, which largely come from the developed societies, the developed world. It also destroys indigenous cultures. And why we are so much concerned about this process is that the indigenous marginalized sections of society, for example the tribes, etc., they definitely are lagging behind, and they are not really able to make their mark in this kind of a very rigid and mainstream teaching learning process. Formal education systems do not employ community-based or indigenous approaches, such as elders passing on traditional knowledge or teaching children about the environment and their relationship with it, or their livelihood and the ways of earning their livelihood depending on the available resources. If we talk about the national trends, then we can mention states like Andhra Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Odisha, Rajasthan and Tamil Nadu, which have a low level of learning in many primary schools. Many students in standards 3rd, 4th and 5th lack basic reading, writing and arithmetic skills. This trend has also been pointed out in a global monitoring report, Education for All 2009. So, the statistics that has been available for several years, for example for 2004-5 and henceforth also, pointed out that 57% of rural girls 12 to 14 years from scheduled tribes and 66% from scheduled castes were in school, compared with the national average of 80%. These figures are as per NSS data 61st round. And if we talk about the international trends, then also we realize that the countries like Australia, indigenous students were half as likely to complete year 12 of schooling as their non-indigenous counterparts. Similarly, in the so-called developed United States, absence from schools were much higher among indigenous children than other groups, as was pointed out by the State of the World's Indigenous People Report, United Nations, 2009. So the problem is not only rooted in India or in the developing world, but also in the developed countries. Australia is again a striking example of extremes in the top 5 in Human Development Index. Yet in 2001 it was estimated that Aboriginals and Torres Strait Islanders in Australia would rank around 103, even below the Philippines and Vietnam. United States education also, the social disparities, African American children, they display lower cognitive development levels by the age of 2, as was pointed out by GMR report 2010. So therefore, we must take into account the factors that are responsible, not only in terms of political, economic, social or cultural factors, but also at the level of theorization. And it is in this context that a very important theory that I am going to talk about today is that of theory of social reproduction. The theory of social reproduction maintains that the existing class structure and social inequalities of individuals in a capitalist society are reproduced time and again by that society. There are a number of different theories as to the causes of social reproduction, and most of these theories have their roots in Marxist framework. Various social institutions related to education are seen as mere extensions of the capitalist state, which serve to protect the dominance of the upper classes, the subordination of the working classes, and the perpetuation of the capitalist class structure, which refuses to die down, and hence the gap between the rich and the poor is widening. Now, while the Marxist explanations focus on economic determinism, there is another explanation that can be provided, and that is cultural and linguistic capital. Now, what is the role of schools or educational institutions in social reproduction of inequality? The educational institutions lead to selection and allocation of young people into a class structure which remains basically the same, and the underlying inequalities in society hence persist. There are some terms that can further help us in understanding this theory of social reproduction better. For example, agency and structure. Agency means an individual's ability to act or choose, whereas structure means the social system or the social hierarchy which determines people's actions. The economic reproductive model that was developed by Bowles and Gintes has discussed how the school functioning inculcated in students certain attitudes and dispositions that are required to legitimize the dominant subordinate relationships in the economic sphere, the hierarchical division of authority, rewards like grades, awards, recognitions, certificates, and competition between students. This process prepares students to be divided into working and ruling classes. While the Marxist explanation largely deals with the structure of the economy and hence the human action or agency is kind of neglected or not studied in the at the same level. The economy requires people to take on different work roles and thus sets of skills, knowledge and dispositions. The economy also requires a reserve labor force, both skilled and unskilled, to keep wages low for the profit of the capitalists and industrialists. There are specific terms that have been used for explaining Marxist approaches like deterministic and structural. Deterministic basically means that people have no choice as their futures are determined. You know, the term deterministic means that the future is already determined for the poor and the marginalized by the economic structure and their specific position within it, whereas the structural means the economic structure which will end up reproducing itself whatever people may do. Another very important term is materialist, which means a focus on the material or economic conditions. The economic and occupational structure is most important in this explanation. Now, the other theory that now I am going to talk about is that of cultural and linguistic capital. Each class has its own cultural background, knowledge, dispositions and tastes that are transmitted through the family. And this idea was largely generated and developed by Bourdieu in 1984. And it was Bourdieu who discussed at length the theory of cultural and linguistic capital, which means that it is not only economic difference that leads to inequality in society, but one's cultural and linguistic capital, the kind of family one is born in, the kind of social contacts an individual has, also leads to these differences and inequalities. And this is called the habitus, to signal its deep routinization, naturalness and embedding within a person's body, language and tastes. So, one's habitus largely decides the kind of language or taste that person would develop, the kind of social networking that person would be having access to, and this also is not only rooted in families, but schools also have a role to play in this. The culture of the dominant group forms the knowledge and skills that are most highly valued and the basis of what is taught in school. To possess that cultural capital means one is considered educated or smart or talented. To not have met that cultural capital means one is considered stupid or ignorant or uneducated. So, what happens is that there is a vicious cycle that develops, and the cultural and linguistic capital inevitably leads to other kind of inequalities. So, the cultural capital, which is the habitus of the dominant group, in this case we can say the middle class, leads to a specific kind of academic performance, which in turn leads to educational credentials. So, there are specific educational credentials that are valued, for example engineering, for example medical education, for example academics, probably a PhD, and this inevitably builds an individual's economic capital, and it is this economic capital that would now again promote a specific kind of cultural capital. So if we see that the workers and the marginalized sections of society, the peasants, etc., have hardly any role to play in this creation of either economic capital or cultural capital, because they are never able to participate as high academic performers. Of course, there are some exceptions, but if we are talking about the majority, then this is what happens. So, the schools look like they are neutral in evaluating students, but as the knowledge and the dispositions which any school or any educational institution promotes, it responds, it corresponds, and it incorporates the habitus and the cultural capital of the dominant group. So the students from that class perform better in schools. Schools require cultural resources with which only some students are endowed, and hence the economically weaker sections, even though they have been given a place in the schools by making 25% reservation of seats for them, they still remain aliens to this specific habitus which is operating in the schools. Another very important discussion that can revolve around is the resistance. The student resistance to school is a kind of a political and cultural response to oppression and limited life chances, and hence we have so many dropouts among marginalized sections. This also highlights the agency. People are able to act, interpret, and they have some power over their own life structures. So the marginalized exercise their agency by withdrawing from the schools, which in any way are not responding to their specific habitus, which means their socio-cultural capital. Now, drawing from Gramsci's formulations of the role of the state in a capitalist society, seeks to analyze and understand the role of state intervention in shaping the reproductive functions of education. Now, if we make an appraisal of social reproduction theories, then reproduction theories do not explain what goes on within the process of schooling and how the processes of reproduction and non-reproduction take place. The school or any educational institution becomes an arena within which the inequalities of society are played upon, they are contested, and where both reproduction and non-reproduction also take place. Language and curriculum also play a very important role in this entire phenomenon. The core of the educational agenda is the use of English language. The medium sets the two systems apart, and as has been pointed out by Bernstein, the children who are endowed with lingual patterns which later help them or hurt them in the schools largely makes a difference and also decides their future course of careers. So, a decontextualized curriculum leads to a reproduction of inequalities and also promotes exclusive schooling, and this is largely indicative by the superiority of certain boards as well as private schools, and how the government schools are rather looked down upon as not being the ideal choice for the students belonging to the middle class families. One must also discuss the challenges of neoliberalism as well as globalization, because there has been a setting of turmoil and resistance as well. There is a need to sustain indigenous identity rather than replace it. And if we talk about the right to education, then it is not only to be seen as a moral imperative and a legal obligation, but also within the framework of inclusive and sustainable development, because only then it would make sense to talk about topics like inequality and difference. Educational planning will require partnership between indigenous communities and state education structures as well as policy makers, so that the tribals do not feel left out and their habitus also must be taken care of while devising the syllabus for them. If we talk about the home and the school knowledge systems, then gender based knowledge and skills, unity of household knowledge, culture, society, as well as development of oral resources, all these are very important. And if we talk about the school knowledge system, then this must incorporate decontextualized knowledge as well as skills. And the problem that is associated with decontextualization of knowledge must be tackled as soon as possible. There should be lesser prescribed knowledge and written knowledge, and compartmentalization of knowledge should also be taken care of. Bourdieu has discussed three types of capital. He argued that both cultural and material factors influence achievement and are not separate but interrelated. Bourdieu also talked about educational capital and cultural capital. He argued that the middle class possesses more of all three types of capital, but the poorer sections of society have neither of these. So, if we are talking about cultural capital, what does it mean? It refers to the knowledge, attitudes, values, language, tastes and abilities of the middle class. And Bourdieu saw the middle class as a capital because it gives advantage to those who possess it. He argued that through socialization, middle class children are more likely to develop intellectual abilities, interests and understanding about the education system, and hence they are able to succeed in the larger world. The working class finds that the school devalues their habitus, their culture as inferior, and their capital leads to exam failure. So, some pupils get the message that school is not for them, thus leading to dropouts, early leaving and hence wastage. Now, if we talk about the educational and the economic capital, then the middle class parents here are again more likely to be able to afford a house near a desirable school, which is known as selection by mortgage, because it drives up the demand for houses near successful educational institutions. Similarly, wealthy parents can convert this cultural capital into educational capital by sending their children to very reputed and highly successful private schools. Habitus is handed down to the next generation through socialization and tradition. Social difference is evaluated by habitus. Therefore, habitus is reason as well as the result of group boundaries and the formation of different milieus. Habitus forms and limits our way of life. It largely determines the borders of thinking as the outer border of our freedom. Intellectuals and artists, through symbolic labor, have the power to redefine the value of cultural capital. Investing in cultural capital by elites as well as by intellectuals. Now, Bourdieu also differentiated between three kinds of power tools, that is the economic capital, the cultural capital, as well as the social capital, which I have just explained. And if we talk about the tribal indigenous knowledge systems, then the tribal people are those groups who remained isolated from the mainstream culture for a long time, and though they have a well developed knowledge system based on their livelihood, culture and available resources, this has failed to be the part of habitus. The tribals are known for their expertise in vocations like shifting cultivation, tussar rearing, spinning, wood carving, beekeeping and lac raising. But none of these skills are considered as important, and none of them have found way in the curriculum framework. With this, I would like to end this lecture. Thank you.